Welcome back to the Meet McKay Show. Today we have a super special guest with us. He has over 300,000 subscribers on YouTube. We talk a little bit about his story, but we mainly dive into the lessons he's learned as an entrepreneur and what he's learned meeting famous people like Kevin O'Leary and the lessons he's learned from them. So without further ado, let's jump right into the podcast. But just before I do, I just want to quickly mention to you guys that I recently launched an executive club. It's completely free. It's just for the people that keep asking me for behind the scenes stories, what it's like working for Kevin, and lessons that I've learned along the way. I learned a lot of lessons that I don't necessarily make into videos, but you're definitely going to want to check out the executive club. Check out that link down below. It's totally free to sign up, just a couple of clicks and you'll be completely done. Promise you won't regret it, and I'm going to work as hard as I can to bring as much value to that group as possible. Without further ado, let's jump into the podcast. Welcome back to the Meet McKay Show. Today we are honored to have with us the legendary Matt Kohrs. Matt, thank you for being here with us. I'm excited to talk to you.
I truly appreciate it. I don't know if legendary is appropriate, but I'll take it. It's a great time. I think we're going to get into an awesome conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So the first thing that I want to jump into is your story. How did you end up with, I think you're over 300,000 subscribers on YouTube. How did you go from 0 to 1 subscriber? Take me through that.
All right. Well, do you want the short version, the TLDR, or do you want to get into some of the details?
I'd like to I think the journey's where we learn the most. So take me through it.
Yeah. So it actually all started back in high school. I think I was in 9th or 10th grade. And my grandparents were invested in the market and they were just talking about, hey, like a portion of your paycheck, you always put into it. So they would talk about it. My parents told me a little bit, but by no means were they into like cryptos, futures, options, day trading. It was always like invest for the long term. So I was kind of interested in it. I had a proclivity for math. I enjoyed math puzzles. And to me early on, that's what it really was. So got a little interested in it. And I remember my first purchase ever was some random penny stock that from like one Yahoo article, I was like, this will redo, I believe, the internet infrastructure of Pakistan. That was my thesis. I was like, dude, this one's going to take off. And of course it went to zero. It was a shitty penny stock, but I was excited about it. And that was hooked. I mean, I definitely lost money there. And then I got into college. And at this point, like many people just didn't have money. So I was learning a bit more. And at that point, I decided as a major to study computer science. So I was starting to code. And I was wondering, is there a way that I get that people, the Warren Buffett style, like reading in on good companies, understanding growth, but I wanted something a little bit more active. And I remember at that point, I was like, I wonder if I could create models for binary options. For those of you listening to this who don't know what binary options are, it is the Wild West. Like you think zero DTE YOLOing is something, like this is completely different. And in fact, that's how I paid for my last college semester. I was just like writing some code, trying to tell me if something was overextended. And it was just complete chaos. So then I get into the workforce. And like many people, when you get first out of college, like you're trying to take it a little bit more seriously, see if you could start your professional career. And I was still a little bit interested. So I was still coding professionally. I was working at a bank at the time. And I was still trying to talk to some of my fellow employees, my colleagues about trading. And they were teaching me a little bit. So it was slow and steady. And then I decided the big corporate life wasn't for me. So I signed for a startup in Manhattan, which is where I am now. And from there, doing more data science. And I had this plan. I was like, okay, I'll get a master's in statistics. So I started that. And the whole plan was to work on Wall Street. And I wanted to be a quant. That was my goal. And I moved to Manhattan in January of 2020. So it was great fun for 3 months. And then it went completely belly up. And if you actually look at the creation of my channel, I believe it is March of 2020, because all of a sudden I was locked inside and I was watching people. And this isn't just to like kiss up here, but I always watch people, Graham Stephan, Andre Jick, and me, Kevin. And I always thought it was so cool. I was like, man, if there's going to be a shot for me to do this, I might as well just start now. So I ordered a little Logitech Brio, a little webcam, and I was like, I'm going to start this. And it was awful. I mean, even to the cohort of people who started with me, almost everyone outperformed me. I don't know if I was the stereotypical like coder who couldn't talk, but if you go to my channel, Reverse Sort, and look at my oldest videos, they are beyond cringeworthy. I promise you, if you are having a bad day, watch one of these videos because you will be like, at least it's not that bad. So I did that for about 10 months. And I remember I'm saying 10 months because that's how long it took me to hit 10,000 subscribers. And once again, relative to my cohort, I was doing very, very poorly. I was underperforming. I wasn't getting views. My just engagement was like not as positive. I was very, very bad on camera. So I have the kind of friend group who was very much into like, oh, okay. Like they love you, but they're going to bully you. Like that was their way of loving. And so they basically kept making fun of how I was speaking. And they're like, dude, it's been months of you doing this. And I was like, well, I have nothing else to do because I'm locked inside like the rest of us. And they're like, just try live streaming. So I remember December 31st of 2020. At the end of that year, I've been doing it now for how many ever months. It was my first live stream. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do this weekly and just get a little bit more comfortable in front of the camera, a little bit more off the riff, no planning, no scripting, blah, blah, blah. Let's go with it. So I was doing that every Sunday, and I was doing that for about 4 or 5 times, something like that. And then at the end of the month, that's when GameStop started to go crazy. And I was paying attention to it because I was always a consumer of WallStreetBets. I was always reading it. I loved it since college. So I was kind of like just in on it, following it as a story. I was invested myself. And I remember it was a Wednesday. I believe it was January 26th or 27th, whatever that Wednesday is. I was so excited because it really started to move. I owned it. And I just didn't have enough time to make that video that day, like just balancing my work and my video. I'm like, I don't know, what do I do? So it's like with my girlfriend, and she's like, why don't you just like stream something? I was like, I don't know. It's like midweek. What do I do here? And I remember Apple and Tesla were reporting their earnings. Apple came up first. I was like, you know what? I'll just stream that. And then I was waiting for Elon to get on with Tesla. In the meantime, there was one errant tweet or comment, I suppose, in my chat that said Wall Street subreddit, like bets subreddit taken down. I was like, oh, no way. So I switched my title. Like I was streaming and I switched my title to start talking about it. And I went from my average about like 75 concurrent viewers to 1,000. And I will tell you, I will always be chasing that high for the rest of my life. I was like, I am media. I am social media. I'm content. Like I just felt like I made it. It was crazy. And the next day, Thursday, Friday, you know, I was a little sick. So I started streaming a little bit more, and like my numbers got bigger and bigger. Called my boss that weekend and said, hey, man, I'm going to be sick all week. And he's like, what? And I was like, trust me, I'm going to be sick all week. I streamed all week. My numbers just exploded, carrying tens of thousands, 20,000 people.
Wow.
So that next weekend, I quit my job and I've never looked back. And obviously the craziness of GME, I believe, then led to Doge. Doge led to AMC. AMC led to Shiba. And overall, like there's always just been other through stories of just like chaos. But it was wild. Like for me, it was truly nothing. Actually, less than nothing. People who started with me were all outperforming me. And then just like snapping a finger, one random decision, all the stars aligned for me by switching the title, just be randomly streaming that night. Just an arbitrary decision in all reality led to this conversation here. And I wouldn't change anything. It's been an absolutely wild ride. And I'm just so excited to see where the next couple of years go with all this hecticness in the markets.
That's insane. So so you were working doing software development when you switched the title. Like I'm just gonna refer to that as like the turning point.
Yep.
And you said you never looked back from the decision of going, basically we'll call it full-time creator entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
You truly never like thought, were you ever nervous? Like, man, I don't know if I can keep this up, or what, was there any sort of hesitation in there? Quick interruption of the podcast really quick. If you haven't yet, consider checking out that executive club link down below. I launched my own personal executive club. It's completely free to join. You're just going to get a lot of behind the scenes stories, news, updates with me, some updates with what it's like working for Kevin, and just a lot of bonus content that is not necessarily super exciting for YouTube, but it's exciting for the people that care. So if you haven't yet, check out that link down below for the executive club membership. It's free to join. Just join, super easy. I'm going to try to put daily effort into it and bring daily content and daily value to you guys. So check out that link down below. But without further ado, let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, definitely always hesitation. I mean, I went from the safety net of being a programmer in Manhattan, like relative to the world, that's very high paying. I had health insurance. So like, yeah, there was a nice safety net there. So to be leaving it, to almost be leaving the honeypot, there were some times like, I mean, at first, I didn't think about it the first 6 months because they were so hectic. I mean, I don't even know if I had time to sleep. But even now, I mean, the overall interest in the markets, the overall interest in squeezing and short squeezing memes is down. So obviously, not only from a financial level, but from a fame level, when things come down, you start to think, be like, okay, what I'm doing. Because like as a human, you always want to be better and better and better. So to see a little bit of a pullback, you're like, well, I don't want that. So there's definitely questions in there. But really what happened was that first 10 months when I was getting nowhere, I was just generically running numbers. I was like, man, if I could get to these subs, if I could get to these views, I know I can at least pay my bills. And I was always like, that was kind of like the goal, like almost the proverbial, like the goal written on the wall, like you're looking at it every day. And just from the craziness of GameStop back in January/February, seemingly overnight, I hit that. And I was like, wait, do I quit now? And my girlfriend was thinking at the time, she's like, wait, you always knew that was the goal. If you're past it, just do it. And fortunately, I haven't really dropped below those levels. So I'm like, hey, at least I can pay my bills at the end of the month. And yeah, of course, doing your own thing, you have really good times. And then there's times that you wish kind of didn't happen. But if anything, I think sometimes that chaos of things not going right, really that's where you see cool, creative ideas. Like that's where I think we see innovation on this finance level that right here, it's boring. If you turn on mainstream media and they're talking about finance, your eyes gloss over and you're just like, you go to the next channel. But when you're doing it individually and you know you're in competition with other channels or just really keeping people's attention, I think it forces you to do something different. And a lot of the times that fails, but it's that 100th try that you come up with something that's unique. And people are like, we love this. So for me, in the moment, it's not fun. It's not like you're sitting there saying, man, I just absolutely love this failure. But retrospectively, looking back at it, you're like, okay, I kind of see how all the points connected. Those first 10 months when I was getting nowhere, absolutely nowhere. I remember, so I started in March. I remember in July was my first good video. And what I mean by good was I posted the video at 7 p.m. I think by the time I went to bed, I had 100 views. And then by noon the next day, I was a giddy little schoolgirl because I had 300 views. I was beaming. I was like, 300 views. I did it. So at those moments, like a lot of success and failure, it's so relative. But even then, I was like, well, I'm not making any money. I'm not doing it. I'm just doing it because I'm stuck inside. And it's really a project that I truly enjoy just doing. But at the time, of course, you always want more. Even right now, like I wish I was at millions and millions of subs and viewers and yada, yada, yada. And maybe one day it will happen. But all I know is just like the only option is to be different. Always look for kind of like a blue ocean strategy. But in reality, you just have to put something out there that's of value. And one way you could define that is doing something that no one else has done before. So I kind of like when things are bad, it forces that creativity.
Yeah, I actually think that's quite profound. What was two questions? One, what was that internal metric that you set that's like, if I can hit this many subs, I can go full-time
Okay.
creator?
I
What was
think
that
for
first
that,
one?
there's some websites out there like Social Blade that like they give you estimations. And at that point, I didn't really know any YouTubers. So I was just going off of that. And folks, if you're watching this, Social Blade's wrong. But at the moment, it was the only source of information I had. So I
Yeah.
remember thinking, oh, okay, I can pay my bills. I think if I had 50,000 views, because I kind of had this assumption, or 50,000 subs. Because I was like, oh, like I'm noticing all of these people, their income is estimated to be roughly double what their sub count is. And once again, folks, this was a completely flawed logic. I'm just telling you what my logic was at that time. I was
Yeah.
like, okay, if it's 50,000 subs, I think I can make 100K before taxes and everything. And it was just some like back of the napkin type of math. And once again, that is all wrong. But I remember that was a metric. I'm like, if I could pass 50,000. And what happened for me was in January, I hit 10,000 before everything exploded. And by the time February came to the end, I was at 150,000. So
Holy cow.
there's almost no reason for me to stop.
And so that was pre-COVID, you hit 100,000, right?
No. That
Oh,
was
of
definitely the
21.
peak of, yeah, this was in 21. So I
Gotcha.
started in
Okay.
March and it took me to the end of the year. That next January, I hit 10 and then everything blew up. And by the end of February, within 6 weeks, I gained like 150,000 subs.
Got it. And when you say Social Blade's wrong, when you said you'd do like roughly double the revenue of sub count, is Social Blade wrong, high or low?
I've actually noticed that a lot of their estimated CPM is lower. This is when I was checking on it back then. It maybe is a little bit more accurate now. Like I hope they are refining it, but I noticed that for those of you who don't know, it's cost per milli, how much roughly you get paid per 1,000 views, and revenue is your revenue per 1,000 views. So your CPM and your RPM. I've noticed that they've kind of under predicted that. And maybe it's because I'm more so of a streamer and maybe they don't know how to properly bucket streamers. So I'd be interested to see other people, but in reality, it's kind of I honestly don't even know the last time I went on one of those websites.
Yeah. When your friends kind of, for lack of better terms, like made fun of you for your scripted videos, did you ever go back to scripted videos?
Yeah, so I did it more as an exercise. Even now, I will try to do it, but I am, for whatever reason, I just cannot pull it off. If you give me a line and you're like, Matt, I need you to say these 3 lines, by the time I repeat it 5 times, like a take and a take and a take, it just sounds so forced and so robotic. And in reality, those are all of my early videos. Every single sentence was a sentence I probably said 10 to 15 times. So of course it sounds forced because I just didn't have that acting ability where I am fully aware that they do take over and over and over. And yet I am so impressed that they are able to make it sound natural. So in reality, I just fell into something that I think was just a little bit, I don't know, more geared to my personality or whatever the word would be. When I started streaming, I was just like, oh, this improv thing is where I'm at. Like, give me one shot. I'll just rip through it. I sound a little bit more natural, opposed to like, oh, like, was that word right? Or like the intonation up and down. Like, it just started to get really messy. So I try it now, and I'd like to think that it's way better than when I first did it. But still, if you listen to my natural cadence in a stream versus an actual like uploaded video, my streams are still way better. It's just where my skill set's at.
Got it. I think that's super interesting. Again, but it's like content creation is just refinement, right?
Mhm.
Like you just refine every time. And I think that you found your streaming, and that was huge. What was the peak of your creative like high? And what
Mm.
was also the bottom where you're like, this is like hard being a creator? Like, I don't know. Maybe you were
Yeah.
doubting your ability. What was, take me through both of those times.
Yeah, phenomenal question. So there were some special highs to me, as I alluded to, the first time I got 1,000 concurrent viewers because it happened out of nowhere, and I thought it was so cool, and just that a jolt of adrenaline. That July 4th video of my very first year, a couple months into it, when I had 300 views, I was just beaming the next day because I like just double tripled my best video ever. So those were really like special to me. I think a lot of onlookers would like more so care about like my peak. And I remember when things got really, really crazy with my streaming, I was invited to go do a show. I was invited to go do the Tim Pool podcast. So I had to go down to the DC area, and my numbers were getting pretty big. And that day, I remember I'm in a Hilton, so I have spotty Wi-Fi, and I'm trying to stream all day. And randomly that morning, someone from Fox reached out to me, and they're like, hey, can you come on the show? And I was like, okay, that's cool. So I'm streaming it that day. My concurrent viewership, I saw the max I've ever seen was 88,000. And then
Wow.
I'm also like, I'm so excited. Like the views are great. I'm like, I'm going on national TV, so make sure to check it out. And then I noticed that the whole time that this is happening, my computer was plugged in, but it wasn't charging. And I realized my charger went bust. So there I
Oh
am on like
no.
6% battery. And like my viewership is wild. I'm about to go on national TV. Now I'm worried that my computer's about to cut off. And I'm just by myself in a random Hilton. And I go down, like, where can I buy one? They're like, dude, you're in the middle of nowhere. You're not going to get a charger for that.
Oh
And I'm
no.
like, what do I do? What do I do? So that I was freaking out. And then I remember like it went successfully. If you listen to that interview, I sounded horrible. I think the line I kept repeating because I was just nervous was, at the end of the day, like I was asked a question and then I started every single response with, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, at the end of the day. And like, that's just, I guess, nerves of talking and whatnot. And then after
National
that, it was,
television, not easy.
yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And then later that day, I went on a podcast, which is a very large podcast. So like that was cool just because like it was the first time national TV, huge podcast, and like just all the other things that were going on behind the scenes that to me, I like look back and I laugh at it. So that was really, really cool. And it was cool to be like, I mean, fortunately, I was selected by like Netflix to be in a documentary there. I was on Jon Stewart's show, like The Problem with Jon Stewart, and that was about the stock market like episode. And like, that was a crazy one. Just like all these moments that seemingly came out of nowhere. And like my major thing is to make sure that I'm just enjoying them. Like these crazy things happen. I'll tell my family, I'll tell my friends, I'll tell my girlfriend. She's like, wait, you're doing what now? And like, I try to just like in the moment be like, now I'm like, oh, wow, this is a cool thing that most likely I'll never be able to do again. So I try to like really appreciate it. On the
Mhm.
flip side of it, for the second part of your question there, the downfall of it, or like maybe some of the negative things. One thing that has happened, there's a lot of folks, if you're an aspiring social media content creator, there's going to be many good things and bad things that happen that you never, ever, ever expect. And on the negative side of it, things that I didn't expect is just the amount of people that like randomly say things about you and then it's a lie. For example, I don't know, in like one of the summers when things were hot and heavy, everything was always better, like week over week, month over month. It just everything was awesome. And then I remember in one of the Julys, it was my first series, we'll call it brand backstep. And it all started from just like a random Reddit post that people said stuff about me that was completely wrong. They had no information. But what's interesting about the internet is it's almost like whoever says something first, the world just believes they're right. We're in this weird situation, which I find really strange in the world of finance, because generally people are like, hang on, show me sources. I need facts. I need numbers. I need all this other proof. But even this certain sub niche is susceptible to the fact that people are like, no, I read it, so it must be true because it's on the internet. It must be true. And so like, I feel like I spent an entire weekend just going back and forth with people. They were like, I heard this. I was like, well, it's wrong. Where's evidence? It doesn't matter. Like blah, blah, blah. And that was a shocking thing to me. And looking back on it, I shouldn't have spent all weekend, but now as you get into it and you take all these, like, I guess, emotional hits, you just start to look to you start to know you should just be overlooking it and be like, whatever, this is not waste my time. It is a waste of my time. But the first time it happens to you, it's the most important thing in the world. So like, I remember going through that, and I would argue that that was the biggest lull in my career, like mentally. And then it happens more and more, and you're like, oh, this is literally just the internet and nothing matters. A little tip to anyone out there, when you get into social media, one of the biggest things I've learned is like, I can't say it just doesn't matter, but things that seem so incredibly big, honestly, if you wait 1 day, a day and a half, 2 days, it just blows over. People just don't care. It's this concept, if you don't put oxygen into it, it will die out, I promise you, within 2 days. Whatever seems so big in your world imploding, if you wait 2 days, you're going to be like, why did I even think about it for a second? So just a little bit of a tip there for everyone listening.
Yeah, that's perfect. I was actually going to ask, like, what keeps you going?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, kind of to build on that. Is there times when the momentum seems to, like, because you have those peaks in 21. Is there times in 22, 23 when it, like, what keeps you going? What keeps you producing? Is it just like, oh, I got to go work? Or is there something more that keeps you motivated?
Yeah. So relative to that peak, I mean, folks, it's not hard to see my numbers are actually nowhere close to it. Like, I hope we could do an interview in the future where I'm actually back and making a new peak. But relative to those crazy, crazy numbers, like, I'm kind of always chasing that. Like, I've now almost just, I guess, a lot of finance creators, we've plateaued. Everyone is just waiting for the next, like, ideally positive thing to happen. So that's been about a year and a half of my life now. Like, why do I keep doing it when the numbers are arguably not as good? And to me, I just love doing my own thing. I know we touched on it a little bit, but I worked at a bank previously, and then I downsized because I was like, maybe that's not the environment for me. I need this concept of like more of my exact decisions leading to an effect. Like, I didn't want to be lost in the shuffle, if you will. And then even at a startup, I was like, still, man, I don't have that much control of what I want. So for me, I just love doing my own thing. If I want to work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, great, I'll crush it. Everything will get better. And then on the other side, if I want to take my like foot off the gas and just take a little bit of a break, I see that as well. I just like being, at least having the feeling of being in control of my own destiny, which I'm not saying it is right or it isn't right in corporate America. It's just where I was personally, I didn't feel like I had that kind of control. If I came into the office and crushed it, it didn't matter. If I came into the office and did nothing, it didn't matter. And to me, especially starting out my career, I found that to be very, very bothersome. I was like, well, hang on, if I'm in my 20s right now and I have the time to like really go for it, well, if I'm putting in all that effort to something, I want to see what the fruits of my labor are. And for me, that's what keeps me going, is because I'm like, oh, great. Like, I did this. I had a new unique idea. I did a bunch of research on whatever stock XYZ and people really liked it, or I messed this one up so they didn't like it. And now I need to think of a better way to explain it. I just like, that aspect of like, you do A and then right away you could see result B, and just something about my personality. I'm just a big, big fan of it.
I love that. That's actually, I resonate with that quite a bit. Like, seeing the fruits of your labor, whether they be good or bad, because if they're bad, you improve. If they're good, then hey, keep going. So
Yeah.
thanks for sharing that. I really like that. So we covered your journey to now. You're at ballpark 300K subscribers. That's awesome. Congratulations. That's not an easy feat. Very few people have ever done that. So congrats on that. There was a time there where you are actually like deleted from YouTube, and there was some drama with that. What happened with your YouTube account getting deleted and everything that transpired with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really a big secret that I've gotten round and round with YouTube, and anyone, as soon as you're longer on like the content creation side, you're gonna in one way or another have to deal with them. And their creator support, I would argue, is the biggest misnomer in the entire world, because all you get time and time again is a bunch of HR people who copy and paste FAQ things as like responses to all your questions. They're not actually there as a human to support you. It's beyond frustrating. And for me, the first time it ever happened was, I remember this was in the height of some like crazy streaming stuff. And I remember one morning I got up and I just had more texts and DMs and stuff than normal. I was like, oh, like what's going on here? And the first one I read was just from a random Twitter account. They're like, dude, so sorry you lost your channel. That's the first thing I read. I didn't read an email or text like that. That was just like, I clicked on Twitter. I was like, what are they talking about? Like, what's going on here? And then I go to my email and YouTube told me that like they regret to inform me, but my channel was terminated for being harmful and dangerous, quote unquote.
Oh my gosh.
And I had no previous strikes or warnings or anything. I was like as clean as they come. And then I got deleted for being harmful and dangerous, like nothing, no warning, no strike. And of course, you appeal it. And for those of you who don't know, when you appeal something like that, the same robotic system that flags you and punishes you in the first place is the same system that reviews your appeal. It's so silly. No human ever appealed it. And I was at that point extremely fortunate that I had a bit of a following on Twitter, because it was Twitter that really people blew it up. And then it got in front of YouTube and I was able to get my channel back the very next day. But if I never had a Twitter, I would still not have my channel. So all I can think about is the people out there who lost their channel and it was inappropriate, but they didn't have a following somewhere else to almost like make it a big issue, because I did follow the appeal and nothing. It got denied. They're like, no, your channel's still deleted. And then it wasn't until it became a very big issue on Twitter that they gave me my channel back. So shout out to everyone who helped with that. Fast forward a couple months, it happened again. Fast forward a couple months, it happened again. I was removed 3 separate times from YouTube for being harmful and dangerous, and there was no reasoning whatsoever. Folks, if you look at my channel, I'm messing around talking about trading stocks as not like, if you look at the harmful and dangerous category for the terms of service, it is very, very bad stuff. It's nothing I want to say in this video because it'll probably get you in trouble for being harmful and dangerous, but like it's very, very bad. I was like, dude, I talk about stocks. This is crazy. And it was after the first one that I got a message from another platform, a competitive platform named Rumble. And I didn't notice it. And it was after the second time that not only was it the platform reaching out, but it was now the CEO. He reached out to me personally. He's like, hey, man, like I see you're going through this. You can come to our platform and we promise you, unless you actually break the terms of service, you will never be kicked off it. I was like, that sounds cool. And basically a couple days after that, I started putting all of my content on both YouTube and Rumble. And that's another thing that I just haven't looked back from. And over there, like the growth has been phenomenal. They're obviously an up and coming company. I'm not saying they're at the size of YouTube, but quarter over quarter, they seem to be growing. I think the most recent reading was 80 million monthly active users. So
yeah, that was crazy.
It has size. So I'm excited to see where it goes, especially because there are politically leaning people on it. So I think as we go into the election year, things can get pretty exciting. But for me, especially in the world of finance, it's a question of how can you de-risk the situation? And I never realized early on that just being on one platform was a risk to me. And then from there, I'm like, oh, you should be on everything, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Kick, Twitch, Rumble. For me, like, I was like, wait, hang on. I'm always here preaching about like de-risking and diversifying. And then yet this one aspect of my career, content creation, all my eggs are in one basket and it could get taken away. It is the most demoralizing shot to your gut ever. Honestly, before when you were asking about a lull, that was probably the biggest lull. The first time that my channel was just ripped away, I was like, oh, wow, I don't have a job. And where I was making money, now it's just gone. Just like the snap of a finger. I just got Thanos snapped out of existence.
Oh my
that
gosh.
was actually probably the biggest lull.
Wow. And so what was your communication like with the CEO and what has your experience been like so far?
Yeah, so Chris Pavlovsky, he's the CEO of Rumble. Basically, that was his pitch. He's like, how about you come to a platform where you're not going to lose everything for just like a random reason? And I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. So he actually called me, which I was like, I didn't even know that CEOs call individual content creators. That was pretty cool. So I was able to talk with him and he just told me what's going on. He's basically said, hey, we're up and coming. And our main mission is we just care about free speech. As long as you are not breaking the terms of service, you can stay on our platform. We are not tipping I guess the algorithm in one favor the other. We're not making just random decisions. He's like, we are here to focus on being the best platform we are, not focusing on, I guess, like random ideology. And I honestly, I still to this day don't know why I was removed any of the 3 times on YouTube. So the communication, it was open, it was transparent. I mean, the fact that there even is communication blows my mind, because folks, if you're on any of these other larger platforms like TikTok or YouTube or any of them, good luck talking to someone that has like actual weight and can do something, unless you're like a massive creator. I mean, there was a story a while ago where the biggest finance creator on YouTube, Graham Stephan, he got a message that his channel was going to get taken down. And what blew my mind was he had no direct contact. I was like, wait, if the biggest finance content creator on YouTube doesn't have contact as someone who can fix a problem, I was like, what am I ever going to do? So it blew my mind when he picked up, and I thought I was going to be talking to a secretary or something. He's like, hey, it's Chris. And I was like, no way. It's not Chris. I'm not talking to the guy who like makes decisions here. So I thought that was crazy. And ever since then, it's just been a blast. Like another, just so fortunate, like because I was on their platform and they're a SPAC deal, that's how they went live. I was there at the NASDAQ at their IPO. Like I met all the people who were there. I met, like, it was just cool to see that type of a thing. It was extremely, extremely exciting. And then just to kind of be there and see how it grows and see their tech advancements, it feels like very early YouTube, where like I get that from a technology and even a popularity standpoint, it's not there, but I'm just focused on the trajectory. At one point, random apps like TikTok were kind of random apps that no one heard of. And then all of a sudden you fast forward a couple of years and they're the hottest things. So do I have a crystal ball that tells me this will be as big? No, but I'm very hopeful, just because I see my own personal engagement day over day, week over week. I'm like, hey, let's just take a shot on it. Let's see how it goes.
Very cool. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So you were actually at the NASDAQ listing, and this is where I actually met you. I met you at the New York Stock Exchange. Tell me about the experience, about going to both. What's the difference? What's the vibes like? I want to hear both your experiences. Hey, quick interjection of the podcast really quick. Just want to let you guys know that Kevin has a coupon code expiring super soon for the brand new AI course that he just launched. We are working, by we, I mean Kevin and the team are working really hard on trying to bring as much value to that new add-on to the AI course as possible to increase productivity with AI. There was a quote by Sequoia Capital the other day. They said that AI is not going to replace your jobs. It's the employees that know how to use AI that will replace your job. So if you definitely want to learn how to use AI in your workplace, in your personal life, definitely check out that link down below for Meet Kevin's courses, especially the AI course, the Elite Hustler course. Send me an email, mckay@meetmckay.com, and I will give you a super special discount if you're a podcast listener. Just send me an email, mckay@meetmckay.com, and I'll get you taken care of. Let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, they actually somewhat happen close together. And I mean, for me, if you're making content in the finance sector, it's always cool to be like, hang on, wait, I could go to an actual exchange. It just seems like kind of one of those moments. So for them, I remember he texted me, he's like, would you have any interest in coming to the NASDAQ for our IPO? And my response was just like 1,000,000,000%. That was my first response. He didn't give me the date, the time, anything. I was like, I will be there. It could be 3 a.m. on a random day. It could be Christmas Eve and I will be there. So that was cool just to see how it went down. They were actually able to allow me to do my morning show from the NASDAQ. So that was a really cool experience with their cameras and all the people working away in the background, like as I'm just saying random Matt stuff. And then a little bit after that, you guys invited me to the New York Stock Exchange, and it's just like I was at the NASDAQ, then I was at the New York Stock Exchange. They happened so quickly. And it was just like kind of like an aha moment. Like if you're making finance content and then you go to the exchanges and you see the people in their suits and all of the TVs doing their thing and the sounds and people ringing the bell, it's just such a fun time. I don't know if I'll ever go back in the future, but like any of those opportunities, of course I'm going to jump on it, just because it's so much fun to see all the people. There's a special energy of it that like I don't know if it could be replicated elsewhere.
Yeah. At the beginning of the podcast, you said that it was always your dream to work on Wall Street, and how you're not necessarily working on Wall Street, you're working kind of with Wall Street, or maybe some people say against Wall Street. It's kind of funny to see that kind of go full circle, how you were on Wall Street and then you were in the stock exchange, then you went to the NASDAQ. And so I don't know, I think that's an interesting full circle to see.
Yeah, it was something that was fully unplanned. I mean, when I started YouTube, I wasn't that confident. Like, of course, I saw people like Kevin and Andre and Graham and Jeremy, and I knew 4 people on this planet were making a living off of it. Like, I understood that. But like, when I got that Logitech Brio, there was no way I thought I was going to be one of those people. No way, no how. I was doing it to pass time because, like everyone else in the world, I was locked up and I was just in a 1-bedroom apartment. I wasn't allowed outside. I was like, I just need something to like do with my time. And then when I saw on a relative basis to everyone who started with me, my underperformance, I was like, well, this is really not for me. I just missed the boat. So I just didn't even think it was an option. I thought, like, wait, hang on. I know if I get degrees and I impress them in interviews and I show them my models, I knew that there was a path forward there. But this concept of streaming the market, the path wasn't there. Not really, especially with a cultural phenomena such as GameStop. Like that just, it never, something like that didn't happen unless we're going back to the 1600s and we're talking about the tulip squeeze, but I'm pretty sure no one was streaming back then. So like that was, I guess, like it seemed tough to me because like that did not exist. But inherently, now looking back on it, to anyone listening to it, that is how you exceed in the world of social media. If I want to go out there and make Meet Kevin style content, I will never, ever, ever get close to his level. Most likely, he's better than me. So you now have to be 10x better than the person who's bigger than you to even possibly catch up. And you probably won't. Like at a certain point, you just have to think of this as a chess match. So what you could do is just be the first one doing something, almost owning a monopoly on that niche. So if anyone cares about it, they have to come to you. So inadvertently, I fell into that. Though I'm not saying I was some genius and planned that. I'm like, oh man, I see the squeeze. I could be the main person doing it. No, I fell into it. But if you're listening to this, like take that as a tip. Yes, you can take some sort of, I guess, guidance or advice or influence from people. But if you want to win in the game of social media, you got to do something no one else is doing. It's referred to as blue ocean strategy. So whether you're doing that for a type of content or even the platform you're going on to, look for those opportunities.
Very cool. I was actually going to ask you, when you were sub 10,000 subscribers, were you on the YouTube, like learning how to YouTube grind? Were you like learning, how do I make a better title? How do I make a better thumbnail? Like, were you very focused on the metrics, or are you focused on, were you focused more on the content? Because I've seen both. I've seen people that are like, I need to have a better title. Like a 1% gets me this much more people. Or it's people like, I don't care about the metrics. I just want to make the best video. Like, where do you fall on that? Because I've seen both.
Yeah, so me with just my comp sci background, I very much cared about the metrics. And I was like, okay, like a little change here, a little change there. Did that help? But in reality, all I was doing was making like a D version video of already the top tier finance content creators. I'm like, oh, it worked for them, so I'm going to try to do it. And then like I would get mad when I was like, well, why am I not getting ranked in search? Why are people not engaging with me? First of all, I put it out later. Second of all, it wasn't as good of content. Third of all, I couldn't talk. Like, but in the moment, it's frustrating. You're like, well, why is it not working? And once again, it's one of those things where you're Monday morning quarterbacking and your hindsight bias. You're like, oh, okay, I kind of get, like, looking at my videos now, I totally understand why they weren't getting views. So it's one of those things that a lot of these drawdowns, let's say, and however you're measuring success, it's when you kind of come out of that gully that you're like, oh, duh, like I had to change this one thing and make whatever, maybe it's your own unique brand or voice. And you're like, that's when it took off. So for me, it all took off when I did something that no one else was doing, yet there was a damn demand for that. Like I was filling some sort of value. So whether you're talking about finance or anything, if you want to go be the best dancer out there, great, just do it. Do it in a way that no one else is doing it. And most likely you'll get some sort of a following.
Got it. I think something that I want to make a point on, that it's like I've started to accumulate being around as many folks like you, folks like Kevin, folks like just all these very successful entrepreneurs that are on their way up. Something that I'm learning is I don't like to say the word lucky, but being in the right place at the right time, and the harder you work, the luckier you get. I think that that's super valuable because you did 10 months of grind with very little success. And then you just did one small title change and everything changed for you. And
Without
I'm convinced, I'm still convinced that you would have been on, like, if you weren't consistent and working as hard as you had been to be at that spot to make that title change, then yeah, you can say I got lucky during the GameStop era, but I think you would have been in the place. Maybe you would have been there when something crazy happened on an earnings call and you were the only one streaming it. So I don't know. I'm just a firm believer in the harder you work, the luckier you get, and you put yourself in the right time in the right place. So I love hearing the things that I'm learning be repeated in stories like yours.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. I don't know if I would have gotten the success I did. I mean, whatever. But there's many classic sayings about it, like luck is just opportunity and then preparation. So like all you can be in control of is your preparation. So
Mhm.
every single day I was making videos. I was just always there knocking on the door. And then eventually I had like someone open the door in the term of that really weird event for me. But the point was like, is every single day I was there, I had the camera, I was already working on it. And I think this is going to be true in many different aspects. I think it's Denzel Washington, or maybe he was quoting someone else. He's like, if you hang around the barbershop enough, you're eventually going to get a haircut. All you can do is be the person at the barbershop. All you can do is being the person who's always prepared, always prepared. And then eventually, whether it's within the first week or maybe it's years down the road, you will eventually get there. It's just like the biggest thing, and I don't even know if this is just accurate for social media or content creation, but I would assume it's accurate in any aspect of life. It's just consistency, showing up every day. I'm sure if you're the Mr. Olympia bodybuilder, or if you're Taylor Swift on stage performing your act, all it is showing up every single day. And a lot of the days are going to suck. A lot of the days are going to be something you don't want to do. You're not seeing the success. And you just have to, for whatever reason in your mind, you need to hang on to something that keeps you coming there the very next day. I don't know what it is. I think it's going to be different from person to person. In a weird way, I was almost lucky that I was locked inside because I had nothing else to do. In a weird way, if I started right now, I don't know if I would have, because all of us, I'm still in Manhattan. My friends would be calling me up every weekend. Hey man, let's go out, this show, this comedy club, this concert, this magician, whatever. Like there would be so many other things. So I don't know if I would have been able to pull it off in reality. I'd like to think that I had some sort of that mental discipline and the drive to keep going. But really, I mean, talking to the entrepreneurs that are way bigger than myself, that's the key thing that I see. Is they're the people who just grind it out over and over. I've read a lot of these biographies, autobiographies on some of the most successful people in the world. And what I always think is laughable is there's always one sentence of like, oh, they did this. And then 4 years later, there's always one sentence of some large time frame that passes and then they hit it. I'm like, wait, you just said 4 years. You said 20 years. You said 2 years. Like it's one little sentence. I'm like, imagine what that actually feels like. Like we read that and they're like, oh, and a couple of years later, they were able to get $1 billion in their front. I was like, what do you mean a couple years later? Like what happened in that time frame where it all sucked and nothing was going right? And I think that's the key thing is for all of us is just realize you're going to have big patches of time where seemingly nothing is going your way. And then you're going to have a random event where you change the title and all of a sudden your stars align and like you're now on the fast track, like just exploding higher.
Yeah. I'm actually looking for a quote because um, I thought it was Steve Jobs, but I think I might be wrong. It said, or it was Phil Knight, one of those guys. It was like it took 10 years, and it took 10 years of hell, and then all of a sudden it was an overnight success. And it's like
I like
it's
that.
so funny where it's just like 10 years and then boom, it worked. But in reality, it all
Success.
compounds.
Yeah,
So
and that's classic.
it sounds like I personally love to read and learn from other entrepreneurs and other they don't even have to be entrepreneurial, but people that are just the best that they are at their craft. I think it's absolutely fascinating to learn how they did it. Who's somebody that you look up to or that you take inspiration from in terms of an entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, actually, just recently, I was at a Bloomberg event and I was able to speak with just a legendary trader. His name is Larry Williams, and it's one of the first books that's actually behind me here. It's called The Long-Term Secrets of Short-Term Trading. It was the book I read in college that even started to get me to think, I'm like, can I code a model that like ends up helping me trade? And then that paid for the last semester of my college. And then from there, I've like consumed more of his content. And just recently, I ran into him. I knew he was going to be at an event. I was like, man, if he's here, he's 81. Like, I need to say something. It's not like I'm going to have that many more opportunities to talk with him. And like, I'm just not a person who goes up and like, I wish I was a little bit more assertive like that. Like, hey, I'm Matt, love you, blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't. I was like, oh, you got to force yourself to do that. So I was like, I saw him. I was like, dude, you gotta talk to him. You gotta talk to him. And I did that classic thing. I'm walking to him and I walk the other way and I just go to the coffee line. And I was like, oh, like, I'm mad at myself. My inner dialogue so negative. I was like, dude, just talk to him. Like, what are you doing? And then I'm getting my coffee and someone walks up as I'm putting like milk into my coffee. And it's just him right there by me. Like he walked up to get coffee. And I was like, oh, like, and I was like, you gotta say, I was like, hi. Like, and I just like blurted it. I was like, I read your book. And he's like, what, man? Like, so he's fresh on my mind just because he was so nice. I mean, the guy's 81, legendary trader, has like all these crazy stories of massive trades, trading with billionaires, advising billionaires. And then I'm just talking to him in the coffee line. So I like him. Recently, I've been reading and listening to like a lot of psychology-based books. Some of the books I read, Jordan Peterson, nothing to do with trading at all, but just a way to view life, like to get out of life what you want. And I think sometimes, and I think there's going to be a couple people listening to this that don't like what I have to say. There's a big aspect of like, hey, like I kind of deserve everything. It's like the classic American way. And in reality, none of these people I've met, or I'm sure you could attest to this with hyper success, not many of them are like, oh, it just fell in my lap one day. It's crazy stories of I work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for years, barely paid my bills, and then ended up working. Like it is, I very much believe it is over romanticized how difficult doing your own thing is, because I think there's a lot of people within corporate America who they're stuck in the honeypot and they want you to be there with them because it's safe. You get your insurance, you get your pay, blah, blah, blah. You get your days off. Once 1 week out of the year, you could go on your vacation. So I think it's over romanticized. It is difficult, but it's possible. I think it's just you have to have some weird level obsession where you just don't stop grinding for whatever it is. And I think it's person to person, as I alluded to before. You need to find that inner dialogue that you say to yourself every single morning that gets you out of bed of why you're doing whatever you're doing. And you just keep doing it and doing it. Now it's called discipline. I remember with some of my ex-girlfriends, they called it me being stubborn. So you got to take it is for what it is. But just an incessant, like almost an unlogical and illogical reason to just keep going forward, even when you're seeing no results. And I actually found that part to be particularly difficult as a person who is a coder and looking at the math of it. I'm like, hang on, I'm doing it right. I'm doing it right. Why am I not getting the results? And it's just because this isn't the world. Life is not a mathematical system. There is a lot of randomness and chaos to it. So because of that, I've really enjoyed some of these psychology books lately of like, that type, like I've been reading like some about stoicism, like that's pretty cool. Like I don't know, more information the better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I some of the questions that I had here was just advice, but I feel like I should put like motivational music over this because you've spit so much fire of advice. I'm like, this is super cool. I'm definitely going to go back and listen to it again just because you've given so much like motivating words to people that are just wanting to have success, and I think that you've spoken to a lot of that. So you've been in the software world of things. What is your take on what's going on with AI right now? Are you like finally the world's caught up, or are you kind of like this is a nothing burger? Where are you on that spectrum?
Oh, I think it's here to stay. I think some of the things are overstated. Like, I don't think next week all of a sudden we're all jobless and AI is doing everything for us. But I think just if you look at the exponential growth of technology, this is a logical step forward. I think there are some people well respected within the tech community who are rightfully pointing out a couple fears here and there. It will like really shake up a lot of different job markets, in my opinion. And I think a lot of the times when parents give advice, they give advice of careers that like work in for them in their generation, and it's not necessarily applicable. So, for example, when I was talking to my parents, I was like, I want to code. I want to be a computer science major. They're like, oh, what in the world is that? And I'm sure going forward, maybe we're going to have people who are like, I want to be a prompt engineer for AI, whatever, XYZ. And even now, we're going to be like, well, that's not a thing. I didn't grow up with that. What is that? But I think it's here to stay. I don't think it's going to be exactly what people are really saying, but I mean, I use ChatGPT all the time now. And yes, of course, it needs many, many refinements. But if this is the first major public rendition of it, I mean, imagine how good it's going to be in 5 or 10 years. Like it's not like this. It's not like this is what we're at. This is where we're essentially starting on a public facing thing. So I'm excited for it. And in terms of investment opportunities, I think there's going to be a lot of things related to that industry that the people who are paying attention will make smart investments. And also the people who are paying attention will be able to ride the wave in terms of a career, because of course you're still going to need people, whatever, prompt engineers, coding it up, yada, yada, yada. The list goes on.
Got it. Thanks. I think I'm still trying to catch up. Like, I'm still trying to learn how big of a deal this really is because I hear it from one side of things where like this is totally disrupting. Like we're not going to have jobs tomorrow, and then like I personally do a deep dive. I'm like, this makes me slightly more efficient, but it's not to the point yet where it's like going to overtake an employee. So I was just curious to hear that. And another question: you're in the stock market every day. You're in the news. Like you're all over the place in terms of where you're listening. If you could sit down and talk with Jerome Powell today, ask him questions or give him a piece of advice, with where you see the economy right now, what would you tell Jerome Powell?
Ooh, the timing of this is kind of interesting because we're pretty much at the end of a rate hike cycle. But not even just Jerome Powell, but if we made it a little bit more general, now
Sure.
this is the first time in my career. Before this, I was always focusing on individual equities. This is the first time that I'm like, oh, I need to learn about monetary policy, historically, what's happened with rate hikes, rate cuts, yada, yada, yada. This concept of making so much money out of nowhere. Now that I've been learning more, and like I get it, those are great headlines, a lot of populist movements of like, how is the government doing it? And this is left and right. I'm not picking on one side. It just seems like we have all these politicians who are so willing to kick the can down the road and be like, okay, future taxpayers will take care of it, future or whatever. If we're talking about homes right now, a lot of things in the real estate market are getting shaken up because mortgage rates went from whatever 2-3%. Now they're skyrocketing above 7. There's real world implications. And it seems like our government and the Federal Reserve, everyone wants to be the nice guy that, hey, things were great. And then they want to give it to the next guy to clean up the mess. And the issue is we're starting now to realize that when the party's been going on and on and on, and money was really cheap and they were giving it to everyone for the lowest interest rates, we're starting to realize now that someone has to pay the bill for the party. And I don't know. I think this is going to be a big learning moment because really from 2009 all the way up to really 2022, things were rip city across the board. Everyone was crushing him. And I think this is the first time in recent history that we're like, oh, okay, like we can't just kind of keep doing this drunken sailor spending spree with money made out of absolutely nothing, just out of the ether. They typed it into their computer. So if I had to talk to either the government or the Federal Reserve about it, it's just more so moving forward. Like, what are we doing with all this spending? What are we doing up with all this fake money? Like, it cannot go on forever and ever and ever. And I get that our economy is a forever expanding credit system. Like, that's just how it works. But we should be at 2%. We shouldn't be spiking at 9%. That just seems crazy. And for the life of me, I cannot understand a room of people who have the fanciest PhDs. Everyone has multiple pedigrees on their wall. How did they fumble this so poorly? And not just here in the US, across the board. I'm like, if these are our brightest minds, it kind of just tells you that either they're not that bright or there's other human influences, as I was alluding to before, of like they just want to be the nice guy that everyone loves. And sometimes we need almost like a Volcker from the 80s who's like, you know what, you're going to hate this, but this is for the best of everyone. So I think there's some interesting human aspects in there that I'd be definitely curious about.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's super interesting. So to wrap things up here, where we kind of talked about this, that when you hit rock bottom, it breeds innovation, it breeds people creating new products and testing new strategies. In terms of a recession, you can consider ourselves in a recession, a recessionary time, in a recessionary area, whatever you want to call it. What's next for Matt Kohrs? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What are you doing? Are you doing the same thing? Are you wanting to do something bigger? What are you doing?
Oh, that's hilarious. What am I doing in 5 years? I get asked
Yeah.
this by my girlfriend all the time. And what am I doing next week? And I'm like, I don't even know. In 5 years, I like this. I like this concept of teaching. But for me, I don't have, once again, talking about fancy pedigrees, PhD. That's not me. I don't have some long career on Wall Street where I'm like, oh, I saw this going on in bonds a decade ago and this in the housing market. So for me, I like this community. Like, I like the fact that there are people who I can teach, but then they also teach me. I view it as a very fun cohort of thousands of people who are all interested in the same thing. So for me, I just want to carry that forward. And obviously, myself, I want to become just more informed about the market, a better trader. I still myself am coding my own trading system. So, of course, I want to do more and more of that just because it's where my interest lies. But to me, in terms of content creation, I'm most excited of how to get this community that's dispersed across the entire world just a little bit more excited, a little bit more connected, and really a little bit more informed. So I'm sure that's going to change over the time, but more in the short term, if you're looking at anyone listening for a little bit of a call out, yeah, I get that the market's tough right now. I think things are going to be wildly different by the end of this year. Just a little couple of fun facts, speaking of monetary policy and pivots and everything. From the 1960s until now, if you look at all the pivots, the time that the government's like, you know what, we're cutting interest rates, there was still at minimum, the drop off has been 27% with the median around high 30s to 40s. I think there's like one more major hit that we're all going to have to stomach. And then from there, I think we're actually going to go on to a nice little run here. So I think the tune and people's attitude about money and finance and investing, I think it could be rough for most of this year, but by the time we get to the end of this year, September, October, I'm actually personally looking to throw money back in and like getting ready for that next bull cycle. And I think that'll last for another handful of years. I mean, the market, it's always cyclical, and like you just need to learn how to ride those waves. So I kind of want to do that not only in the market, but see how I can match my content and the community around that particular cyclical nature.
Got it. That's super cool. Do you see yourself staying in content creation for the long haul, or are you wanting to step into the world of, hey, like I want to run a business, I want to have 500 employees, I want to IPO a company? Is that a dream of yours, or are you kind of just happy with what you said, like staying in the community?
Yeah, so for me, I definitely the latter is what I'm interested in. Right now, I'm very happy. The next handful of years, I will be making content. This is me. But I think there's going to be a point where I just in my own personal life, like move on, whether I want to start a family or things like that, that I think it'll just be hard to keep up the same content schedule that I have now. And I'm sure you're personally like seeing that almost day over day, that I'm willing to make a lot of sacrifices now. In a couple of years, I'll be willing to make some. But like, I think I don't know, if you extrapolate out a decade, I don't think I'm going to be willing to make the same sacrifices I am now in terms of like this content schedule. But because of that, I would love to turn to a business because I still love talking with people, talking about the markets, trading, doing this thing, that thing, something somewhat tangentially related to this sector. For sure, want to build a business around it. But this concept of streaming pretty much every day of my life, I don't know how sustainable that is. I mean, this is really the first major advent of streamers starting within the past, whatever, 3, 4, 5 years. It'll be interesting to see what the natural, almost like shelf life of us are, because it burns you out, man. It is a hard thing day. Like, I mean, even in 2021, when things went crazy for me, for an entire year, I streamed 8 hours a day, Monday to Friday.
Wow.
I did an extra hour beforehand on Twitch, and then I did all my business calls afterward. So Monday to Friday, crazy streaming and working. And then Saturday and Sunday was when I structured all my other business things. So legitimately for a year, as I was alluding to before, of like these people who work 16 hours, I remember I started tracking it. That was literally it. It was just over 16 hours, 7 days a week for an entire year that I worked. And that's serious burnout. Like I remember I just ran into a wall, and like one day I got up, I was like, my brain, it felt like it was just turning to mush. I was like, this is not sustainable.
Got it. Cool. Yeah, I look forward to seeing your future projects and your future growth as well. I again was super privileged to meet you in New York, meet you at the stock exchange, and hang out with you for a bit. We had dinner, got to know you and your story quite a bit, and so I was anxious to have you on the pod. I appreciate you, Matt, coming on. It's been a ton of fun. I hope that the viewers have gained a lot of motivation from this, because I feel like a lot of people can resonate with your story of not wanting to fit into a corporate mold and to try things. But it's like you said, it's a lot more romanticized of, oh, I'm gonna go start my own business. When in reality, it's those 16-hour days, it's the burnout. How do you deal with it? Your peaks, your valleys, and everything in between. So thank you for sharing that, Matt. For me, it was an inspiration and highly motivational. I appreciate it. Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me across all of social media at Matt_Kohrs, or just search Kohrs, Kohrs, on Rumble, on YouTube, on Twitter. Fortunately, it's a little bit of a rare name, so I should be able to pop up. But it's been a pleasure talking with you. I'm excited to see where your show goes. And folks, if you didn't find me to be motivating whatsoever, remember what you can do is reverse sort all of my videos and watch my horrible content at the start, and at least you'll feel better about your life. So this will be a net ad for you at a minimum.
Got it. Awesome, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If you guys haven't yet, consider subscribing. Go check out Matt and his stuff. Go learn a little bit about the market and what Matt's up to. But like always, guys, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks for watching. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode with Matt Kohrs. I had a ton of fun learning from him. He's a super awesome guy, super kind, super genuine, but he also shares a lot of motivation with me about what I need to do as an entrepreneur, and that I just got to keep going. So I hope you guys were able to get a little bit of inspiration from that. If you haven't yet, check out that executive club membership. Also, if you do want to check out Kevin's courses linked down below, especially that AI course, I highly recommend checking it out to increase productivity. And if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. Lots to do, but I cannot wait to bring as much value as possible to you guys. Like always, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next episode.